The Friday Night Funkin' Unknown Executionable mod just dropped, and in this video, I want to go over each of the creepypasta / horror themed characters that we actually get to see in this mod. The first character that I want to start off with is going to be Restart, or aka Restart.exe. Now I'm sure none of you will be surprised, but a lot of these backstories are actually pretty dark, and Restart is no different. So Restart is a character that was trapped inside a copy of the game called Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Specifically during the game over screen. Now what I mean by this is that he had a player that was actually playing the game that got so angry that he just rage quit. And Restart in his video game form was basically just trapped in that game over screen, which of course is how he got the name Restart. The sad part here is that Restart was trapped in this kind of limbo for various years, until one day he found this black rift that basically sent him to the void. When he came out of the other side, he was back into his video game universe, but he was immediately attacked by a Flicky, which are those little blue birds from the Sonic universe. And of course, since it was Sonic versus a Flicky, he was easily able to take it out. And that's actually what he's using as his scarf right now. I know a lot of people think that that thing around his neck is fur, but it's actually the body of the Flicky that he took out. Now the cool part here is that when he was able to get back to his universe, since it had been in this limbo for so long, or aka this game over type state, the rest of his universe had basically started to disintegrate. So in order to kind of survive, he had to go back into the void and continue waiting. Now years and years later, that person who actually rage quit and left the game finally comes back and restarts the game, and that is how Restart is able to get back to his regular universe. While this one is definitely one of the tamer EXE stories, it is kind of chilling to think that he had to sit basically in darkness for years and years and years, kind of like the Void Sonic. The next character that we see on our list is called Dream Hero. He's the one that kind of looks like Kirby, but his real name is actually Dave Miller, and his story goes like this. Now we know that Dave Miller was a father, but we don't know the name of his actual kid. But what we do know, and what's important, is that we know that his son actually ends up getting sick, and he's sick in a way that is basically killing him slowly. Now the only thing that was making this kid happy was when there was a Kirby commercial that came on basically advertising the game. Now since the son loved these commercials so much, he asked his dad if there was a Kirby show that he could watch, but at the time there wasn't actually any type of Kirby TV show, so obviously the dad couldn't give him this. And the dad really wasn't in the position to be able to pay for the game because he was paying so much for his son's treatment that was pretty much all he could afford. So in desperation, Dave made a deal with the devil, and he basically said, "I'll give you anything if you just give me the ability to make my son happy." Now obviously Satan heard this man's pleas and he granted him his wish. He gave him the ability to make a show that his son would love. Now here's the part where it gets really dark. Satan also makes it to where Dave becomes a cannibal, and of course his first victim is his own son. Satan thought that this would be kind of funny because Kirby's main gimmick is that he actually inhales his enemies, right? And when he swallows them, he takes their abilities. But Satan took it very literally, right? And Dave just devours people, period. It seemed that years later, people tried to pick up and continue the show because they had forgotten all the trauma that went with it beforehand. But it seemed that the footage in the show itself was cursed because whenever people would actually try to play the old videos, there would be this weird face of Kirby that would come up, and it would either be blank or it would show his full body with his limbs stretching and elongating. Super creepy. Now the worst part about this situation is that anybody who's actually able to finish the tape that was created, meaning that they watched it to its completion, at the end of that tape, they would see the date and time in which they were going to die. And now while I'll admit Dave Miller himself doesn't look that creepy, but his actual backstory is terrifying. Put this down in the comments. Which one would you rather have? The ability to know when you are going to die or how you are going to die? I think one of them is definitely worse than the other. The next character that we have on our list is going to be Mario MP4, also known as Shadow Mario. And this guy's interesting because he's not technically a creepypasta, but more of like a media / urban legend type character. Something else that makes MP4 very interesting for me is that he can't really stand on his own, and I say that because he's kind of like a parasite, meaning that the only way he truly exists is if he is actually mimicking some other creature or some other being in general. Now what's strange about this is that he can take on the shape of a person, he can even mimic their voice, but he will always only look like a shadow version of the person. Now what really makes him dangerous is that he gains power each time he kills something. So that means it can be a person, it can be an animal, it can be anything that he's mimicking. If he takes it out, he gets more powerful. And to make matters worse, he's kind of like Sonic.EXE when he can basically revive anybody that he's killed from the dead and make them work as his minions. Now it seems that since MP4 is like a shadow type of entity, he can't actually be killed himself, but he can be hurt. Now there is a caveat to that though. The only way he can really be hurt is if the person who he is mimicking decides to unalive themselves. So in order to hurt him, you basically have to give up everything, and I don't know if that is really worth it. Now, even though MP4 looks like Mario, he is definitely not friendly and he is super malicious. I say this because he basically likes to toy with his victims. He'll find everybody or everything that they love, so brother, sister, mother, father, dog, cat, fish, whatever, and he will unalive each one of them before he actually goes after the main person. So not only is he trying to kill his victims, but he also just wants to hurt them in the worst ways possible, just simply sadistic. Now, something interesting about how MP4 catches his victim is that he pretends to be their shadow. And this is a brilliant plan because obviously MP4 can only take on a shadow version of his target. And since he basically just follows in their shadow, they don't actually get to know that he's there. And even if they do see some movement that is off, they'll probably just think it's a trick of the eye and won't really pay too much attention to it. And then when the time is right, he can strike them without them even knowing that he's there. And if I'm being honest, this guy is one of the creepiest characters I've covered so far. Between his abilities and the fact that he doesn't feel any emotions, he's basically a serial killer with superpowers. The next character we're going to talk about is going to be Dread Sonic, or aka Dread.exe. And this character is interesting because this is a version of Sonic that is basically trapped inside one of the Sonic video games. He realizes that he's trapped, and what he wants to do is get himself and of course his friends out of that world. So he basically starts trying different things in order to crack the code, but he starts to get more extreme and more violent. And it gets to the point where he's even willing to hurt his friends in order to gather data that will help him get out of this world. Now, what people didn't notice until it was too late is that Sonic was basically going crazy. The only person that kind of caught on was Dr. Eggman, but even by the time that he was able to catch on, Sonic had already destroyed Metal Sonic, which is a big deal because even though Metal Sonic and Sonic had gone at it a lot of times, Sonic never really tried to just straight up destroy the robot. Since Eggman had just seen how violent Sonic had become, he basically made a plan where he rigged the Death Egg to explode as soon as Sonic entered a certain room. But in his eagerness to kill Sonic, Dr. Eggman actually forgot to make an exit strategy and ended up taking out himself. Now this is where it gets really dark. Sonic is able to survive the explosion, but he realizes the reason that he survives is because the person who was playing the game, basically controlling him, has left. So Sonic comes to the sickening realization that he was being controlled this whole time. And not only that, but since the player isn't hitting the continue button, Sonic is basically sitting in like a near-death state with half of his body blown off because of the explosion that Dr. Eggman set up. That's why in the mod we literally see him with pieces of his body gone. To make matters even worse, Sonic is basically sitting in limbo, kind of like Restart Sonic at the beginning of the mod, and he just has to suffer through all this pain until the person comes back and hits the continue button. And while it's obvious that Sonic did do a lot of terrible things in this story, I still feel kind of bad for him because nobody deserves to be tortured the way he has been tortured in this story. That is horrible. The next character that we have on our list is called Anglerjaw, and this is a version of Sonic that's like half Sonic the Hedgehog, half anglerfish. Now for those of you that don't know what that is basically the fish from Finding Dory that had the light on his head. The lore of Anglerjaw is kind of similar to MP4 Mario in the sense that he can basically change his form. Anglerjaw does it though in order to basically lure people in thinking that they're safe and thinking that they're going to like talk to their friends, but in essence it's actually Anglerjaw tricking them so that he can eat them. The good news about this character though is that he basically lives underwater, so if he's outside of the water, he only has a few minutes before he has to go back into the ocean or he will die. And he's also super slow on land, so if people understand that they're being tricked, they can actually get away from him fairly easily. Now apparently Anglerfish used to be a human that actually drowned, but instead of going to heaven, when he woke up, he was in a game titled Anglerfish. Now rumor says that somebody that worked at Sega is actually responsible for drowning this man, and this is why he's actually luring people in 2 different video games in order to devour them. One of the scary things about Anglerjaw is that he can basically jump from video game to video game, which means that he basically has open access to any victim that he wants. As long as there's water in the game, he'll be able to survive, and then he'll be able to drag that person into the actual game and then take their soul in essence. And if that wasn't bad enough, since he's been turned into this Anglerjaw creature, he's slowly been losing his mind. So now he has no remorse and no sympathy for people, and he's just attacking victims at will. The next character we'll talk about here is going to be Sunky, and in this mod he actually has a store, and I'm pretty sure this is the first time that Friday Night Funkin' mods have actually had a shop in it. And basically as you play through the free play songs and you start to gather rings, you can use those rings to actually buy items off of this shop. And that actually leads us to another opponent in the mod called Harry Potter Sonic Obama. And this is actually an item in real life. It was basically just a bootleg Sonic backpack. There really isn't much more known about that, and I think they just made it into a funny little meme character for the mod. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this one where I go over the new Funkin AVI mod, or check out this video where I go over the new Minecraft mod. Thanks for watching, subscribe today to become a member of the Orseofkorse, and we'll see you tomorrow with another one. Peace, peace.